Fire it back up for Connor Hellebuyck. He has requested a trade from the Winnipeg Jets. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Sabres.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? What's up, Sabre fans, and welcome into this August 27th edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you listen to your podcast, wherever you may be listening. Be sure to give us a 5-star review. That is always greatly appreciated. If you are interested as well in our YouTube channel, if you want to watch the show, you can do that. Go to Locked On Sabres on YouTube. Just search Locked On Sabres. It'll come right up. Give us a like and subscribe there. If you're interested in our Everydayers Club, little Connor Hellebuyck talk in there today. In our Discord, ad-free versions of the show. We've got our one-on-one text feature coming soon as a part of that as well. If you'd like to sign up, head over to lockedonsabres.supercast.com. That is the place to sign up. Sneaky Joe DiBiase on today's show. We are presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this Major League Baseball season. We were going to start through the Atlantic Division, going team by team, and we will do that, but we were interrupted by some good news that we can start to focus on Connor Hellebuyck again, because the breaking news here at the end of August, as we are approaching training camp, and I've been wondering out loud a lot lately, what's going to happen as we get closer to camp. Everybody knows Connor Hellebuyck wants to be traded. It was not official. It was not out there like a public declaration like we have today, but he had said it at the end of season press conference, basically that he wanted out in so many words. He also had a lot of rumors surrounding him at the draft with the Sabres and whatnot, and about all those American players that could be wanting out of their current situation. So I've been wondering, like, all right, we're going to get close to camp here. Is he just going to show up? Is he going to do media? Is he going to kind of soften the blow? Like, I'm a Jet. I'm here. I'm committed. Like, move past it a bit. Would he make it uncomfortable and awkward? Or would he just not show up? And still don't know the answer to that question, but he is certainly trying to push the envelope, because today we got that public declaration from Connor Hellebuyck via his agent, Ray Pettico, who is on Twitter and posted the statement from Hellebuyck, which reads as such: Winnipeg has been my home for my entire NHL career. I will always be grateful for my time there. I never forgot, so many words going through his journey. Several months ago, I privately requested a trade. I have tried to handle the situation quietly and respectfully while giving the organization time to explore its options. With training camp approaching, I felt it was important to publicly confirm my request. My position has not changed, and I believe moving on is the best path forward for me and my family. I appreciate everything Winnipeg Jets fans have meant to me throughout my career and hope a resolution can be reached soon. I think that kind of reads like Hellebuyck is not going to show up to training camp. That's why he's putting this out there, to try to increase the urgency on Winnipeg's end of, don't just assume I'm going to show up. Like, I want out. Get me out. And I think you can respect an athlete who respects the fans and the place that he has been one of the greatest players of in franchise history. He knows that his number will be retired someday there, and he doesn't want to burn bridges, I'm sure. And I think this is the right way to do it. I do think that's the right way to go about it if you are Connor Hellebuyck. But you need the organization to answer the bell and move on from you to make that work. And I get the sense that the Jets played around here, and they didn't have urgency. And Kevin Cheveldayoff, who is notorious for acting this way and really dragging on deals, that goes back to when the Jets began as a franchise, how he's acted and been that way as a GM. That this time he might have got himself in trouble. He might have passed on a deal at the draft from the Buffalo Sabres that he's not going to get again. One, because the Sabres aren't capable of making it anymore. And two, no other NHL team is going to pay what they were willing to pay. That's my guess. My guess is the Jets are really going to regret not making that deal. And I think part of why they didn't have urgency then is they, I think, thought, oh, we'll just, keep going. He'll come, he'll show up. He'll be a good soldier. And no, he wants to be traded. And you took a gamble on that. And I think it's about to really blow up in their face if they don't act now. And even if they act now, still might not get what you were getting offered before. So he's going to push for this. And I think that makes it likely that he is going to be traded before training camp. That would be my guess. And I think this is an act. This is a nudge in that direction for the Jets to make sure they know you got to get this deal done. You got to do this for me before the start of the year, before the start of training camp, even more so. So here we go. Fire it back up on Connor Hellebuyck. The deal is going to happen at some point, but with who? And that is obviously a real big piece of this, and that's beyond the Sabres. And you see the Hellebuyck trade, and there really isn't this flood of, well, this team makes sense, and this team makes sense, because there are not a lot of teams that make sense. Again, another reason why Winnipeg, I think, made a big mistake here is they waited on Hellebuyck until all these teams that might have wanted him and wanted goalies made other goalie moves. Edmonton might have been in the market. Maybe they could still be, and they might not want to trade him to Edmonton anyway. But you allowed them to go get Freddie Anderson and Devin Levi. So this move feels too big for something like that. You allowed Toronto to go get Sergei Bobrovsky. Maybe Toronto would have been interested in Connor Hellebuyck. He might not have been interested in them because it sounds like he might want to go play in the United States. But you get my point. The market shrank because they didn't act right away. And now, how many goalie needy teams are there? And the Sabres, I think, should still be considered the favorite. And we'll get to a lot of the reasons why it's a tougher deal now, likely, than it was at the draft. But the Sabres' desire for Hellebuyck should not have changed. That's an upgrade. That's a star player. That's a guy you can rely upon and hopefully rely upon in the postseason. And I think with a better schedule, you would be able to do that. The reason, though, the Sabres deal gets tougher, I don't think it gets tough enough that they shouldn't still be considered the favorite. I think right now, looking at the landscape and who makes sense and who doesn't, yeah, the Sabres don't make as much sense as they did 2 months ago. I still think they make more sense than any other team. Now, the reason why they don't make as much sense is the deal part of it with Winnipeg, not the motivation of the player. We already know Hellebuyck would waive his no-move clause to come to Buffalo. We already know that. We know he wants to win. That he has here much more than he would have with the Jets. And we know he wants to be in the U.S. Check. So we've got those checks in place. But what about the deal itself? The toughest part of this is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And the perfect match he would have been to go back to Winnipeg. The Jets reportedly would like a goalie in return. That's kind of been a part of this since the beginning. They did sign Stuart Skinner, so they have somebody, but another goalie has always made sense in that deal. And it doesn't sound like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen would really be signing up for Winnipeg. And he does have a 5-team no-trade clause, so he can block that part of the deal. And if that's true, that really makes this tough because, all right, well, we got to start figuring out if Winnipeg's interested in your other two goaltenders or if there's another team out there that has a goalie that makes more sense for them. The other thing that we've known all along is that Winnipeg wants a number 2 center. And remember when there were Vinny Trocheck rumors at the draft for the Sabres? I wonder if that was connected and that was the place where, maybe he was going to be the replacement for one of the centers that was going to Winnipeg in a deal for Hellebuyck. Well, he's not available, so you better be confident in your kids being in roles where a veteran center is going to go out to go be the number 2 guy in Winnipeg. So those two factors do make a deal tougher. But again, my optimism is still based in who else makes more sense. And let's go through a couple teams that we haven't talked about as much with Hellebuyck that could, but are tough sells too. That's next here on the Locked On Sabres podcast as Connor Hellebuyck requests a trade from the Winnipeg Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform, from sales and accounting to inventory and marketing. Everything works in one place. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone work towards the same goal, and that's true in sports just like it is, of course, in business. So go to odoo.com. Great organizations will win because operations matter. That's why you should get Odoo. Odoo, one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Stinky Joe back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. All right, who else is in the market for Connor Hellebuyck? And we also should take a few minutes here on if Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen cannot be in this deal because he will not sign off on going to Winnipeg, where else could you send him? Because you would want to do that, although I will present the idea today of you keep them both because maybe if that's your only option, that is still a better option than not making the deal at all. We'll get to that too. But starting with Hellebuyck, the team I always mention is New Jersey. Every time it comes up, like the Devils are the team I always look for. Like that team is good and talented, and they lost. They traded away Jacob Markstrom in the offseason, and they don't really have an established number one goalie. They have Jake Allen. That's kind of close to that, but he's always been more of a 1B or just a straight number 2 in his NHL career. They also have no money tied up in net. Now, that's by design. They're paying $3.9 million total to their 3 goaltenders, Jake Allen, Nico Daws, and David Riddick. Now, those 3 together doesn't sound like a very good trio, but the Devils have reportedly never really been in on the Hellebuyck idea because their new GM, Sonny Meadows, a sharp guy, analytics world. He wants to go cheap in net. So doesn't sound like they're gonna do this or even gonna be in on it, barring a change. Now, here's a couple teams that I'm thinking more about right now with this news for Hellebuyck. One is Carolina. Now, Carolina was reportedly in on this originally and then dropped out of it because they didn't really have the assets that made sense for Winnipeg. Winnipeg wants center. Carolina doesn't really have an obvious center to send back to them. They could send Logan Stankoven, but the Hurricanes are not going to want to do that at all. So they don't really have the centerpiece. Do they have the goalie piece? They do. They could send Brandon Bussey back. He's cheap. He's under contract. Pair him with Stuart Skinner. Like Winnipeg would have a reasonable option in goal if Bussey was the guy to go back in that deal. But that's not enough. You're going to need the center. And they don't have the center. Now, there also was talk that Nikishin on the blue line would be the guy that would go to Winnipeg, but Winnipeg doesn't want him. So Carolina, like there's some merit to that idea, but it's not a great fit for the trade package in some way that maybe even the Buffalo one isn't. But I feel like the goalie piece is an easier workaround than the center piece, and Carolina doesn't have the center. That makes sense. And I think it's a tough deal to make as a Stanley Cup champion. You know, like, okay, it's going to take Logan Stankoven to get this deal done. Like, you're not going to want to do that. You just won the Stanley Cup with him as an important piece. Like, there's going to be emotional reasons why you're not going to want to part with a guy like that on top of hockey reasons. I guess they could part with him. You know, he's a 40-point player. But I don't know. It doesn't feel like that's the move that Carolina's ready to make. But they're an idea here because nobody makes a lot of sense. So, you know, there's some reason to think them. And then another team that I will throw out here that I think you actually have to and are required to throw out for any big name that becomes available because they're always in on everything is the Vegas Golden Knights. And that might feel nuts because They are, if you go up and pull up their Puckpedia page right now, the Vegas Golden Knights are $8.6 million over the salary cap. So how are they acquiring an $8 million goaltender? That feels like that should be impossible. But with Vegas, I think you always have to consider they have a way. They just have a way of being in on a deal. And I'm looking at their cap picture. And if they wanted to get involved here, they, like Carolina, don't make a lot of sense trade-wise for what Winnipeg would want back. Could they make the salary work? They would need to send Adin Hill back. So Winnipeg's going to need to take Adin Hill, which on one hand, maybe they would want to do because that's a goalie that's under contract, that has term, that has had good seasons. But on the other hand, he was terrible last year. He's 30 years old, and he's making $6.25 million per year. By the way, he has a 10-team no-trade list, so he might say no to you anyway. But Adin Hill would have to be involved in the deal. And then if he were, then we're talking about a $2 million difference that they're going up in net. And whatever piece they might be sending back is like Ivan Barbashev, the name, although he's not a center, but he has played center in the past. Like, they're tough. Thomas Hertl would maybe be a guy, but he's aged. Like, Winnipeg's going to have to want to try to win again right now, and they're going to have to get backed into a corner. That is the way Vegas works. If Hellebuyck backs them into a corner and says, I only want to go there, and they just have to make whatever deal they can. So I'll throw Vegas out there. No, they don't make a lot of sense, but I'm running out of ideas. San Jose's come up. I don't think they would want to do it, but they're another idea here with Askarov, Nedeljkovic in goal, and could Askarov be the piece that would go back to Winnipeg? Do they really have the center to send back? Again, no one's perfect here. Not to just reiterate the same point, but that's just really where it's at. Now, if the Sabres were to get a deal done for Connor Hellebuyck, is there a place they could send UPL? All these places we just talked about are ideas. Here is one team that I did not mention for Hellebuyck that I think could make sense for Luukkonen. The Kings. The Los Angeles Kings, who have been a playoff team in recent years, but never really a serious Stanley Cup threat. I don't know what their plan really is long-term. They have two goaltenders right now that are both NHL goaltenders, Darcy Kemper, Anton Forsberg, that are both going into the final years of their deal. And if you called up the Kings and said, hey, you're still a competitive team. If you want a goalie for beyond this year, we will trade you Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and we won't even ask for that much. We'll ask for your a second-round pick and a B-plus prospect just to get the salary off our books. You get a starting caliber goalie that is going to be around longer than 1 year, which is the current situation you find yourself with your two guys. I think the Kings make sense for Luukkonen, and can't imagine they'd be on Luukkonen's 5-team no-trade list, Los Angeles, competitive team. The other one I wondered about is Winnipeg for short-term reasons, because Freddie Anderson is already injured, and they are a Stanley Cup contender that's going into the season with Tristan Jarry and Devin Levi. And even though they already traded for Levi and signed Anderson, I wonder if they would stop there. I think they are less likely. The Kings are the team I think that could make more sense for Luukkonen. Now, I will say this. I think it's not crazy, despite how expensive it would be, to consider the idea that if you can't find a good Luukkonen destination right now, and you can get Winnipeg to do the deal without getting a goalie back or without a Luukkonen back, then you should just hold both of them. And that would be a lot of money. I mean, we are talking about, between the two of them, like $13 million invested in goal. They have the Sabres have $5.1 million in cap space right now. If they were to make a couple of deals that I have laid out here that do not involve Luukkonen, I think they can afford to pay both for the time being until such events, such time that a team either gets an injury in goal or something changes with their long-term plans. Maybe a GM gets fired. Maybe a goalie has a significant injury. Maybe a guy has a bad year and they want to change. That you hold Luukkonen until that team comes up. And whenever that team at the trade deadline maybe becomes available, you send him on his way and you you keep going with Hellebuyck. That, I think, is a realistic concept that the Sabres should not say no. That should not be a deal breaker to the Sabres if they can't find somewhere for Luukkonen. And while they're both here together, Hellebuyck gets 2 of every 3 starts, and you give Luukkonen a third of the games, and you go with the same idea that we've talked about with Lyon, which is you keep Hellebuyck in the 45 to 50 game range because you have another goalie who can play a bunch of games. Now, on that concept, I got a couple of trade ideas that work for the cap that involve the Sabres keeping Luukkonen and acquiring Hellebuyck. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Indeed. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed-sponsored jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People who are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the last minute, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data, worldwide. And usually the biggest difference isn't someone that's doing more work. It's someone that knows exactly what is needed to happen and helps everything run smoother. And one great addition can have a ripple effect on everyone around them. When you find someone who brings the right skills, attitude, and experience, it makes the entire group a whole lot better. Spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job premium, the premium status that it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Sabres. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. Sneaky Joe back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, wrapping things up with a couple of potential trade packages that would involve Luukkonen staying and Hellebuyck being added to the mix. An expensive goalie room, but you could do it for the time being with the current cap picture that the Sabres have. But it's going to take some salary going back the other way. The Sabres have exactly, according to Puckpedia, $5.1 million in cap space. Hellebuyck makes $8.5 million. So you're going to need to send a minimum of $3.4 million going back the other way, which I don't think will be a problem. I think they could do that almost easily. And that would just come in the players that Winnipeg would find value in. We know they want a center. So I'll give you my number one package. The number one package right now that if I were Jarmo Kekalainen and I felt like I could not trade Luukkonen or Josh Norris, by the way, because they had trade protection kick in and they're not going to the Jets. If those two players are off the table for me, here's the move I am going to the Jets with. And I'm hoping, by the way, that I'm in a position of strength because they've got a timeline here. Hellebuyck doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to show up to camp. They don't want to make it ugly. They've got to make a move. And you've got a limited market. So, position of strength for the Sabres. You've got the unhappy player and you don't have a great market for him. That's where you would try to take advantage again. I'd offer them a 5-piece trade, but it's not as bad as that sounds, a 5-piece trade. I'm going to start with Ryan McLeod. I just feel like McLeod's got to be in the deal. And I don't know how into that idea the Sabres would be now that they are kind of limited on options to replace him from outside the team. But I guess my sales pitch would be, why do you need to add a center? Like, why did you ever need to add Vinny Trocheck or someone like him when trading a Ryan McLeod away? Because I think, and why I would be comfortable trading McLeod if I were the Sabres, he got demoted to fourth-line center last year, and that was with the guys you currently have on the roster, not including Yuri Kulik, who I know plays a very different role than McLeod. But if I traded McLeod today, my centers are Tage Thompson, Josh Norris, Konsta Helenius, Yuri Kulik, Noah Ostlund, Peyton Krebs, Sam Carrick, Tyson Kozak, Justin Danforth. I still have 9 NHL centers. That's a surplus, a total surplus, and they should feel comfortable moving Ryan McLeod. Rodney Murka. Now, Chad DeDominicis, in his story yesterday, Expected Buffalo, talked about that Adam Kleber would be the idea for Winnipeg. So you could make it him if you want. Second-round pick of the Sabres, had a good college career here, and is tracking towards being an NHL defenseman. You could make it him if you want. I'm throwing Murka in, though, just because I see him as having a little bit more value, and I'm trying to get this deal across the goal line. And then I'm going to include a first-round pick because, I feel like you always got to do that. So I'm at McLeod, Murka, and a first. I'm not done, though. I'm going to help Winnipeg get their goalie situation. I am going to offer them, because it's the best I got, even though it's probably not ideal for them, but they might have to take the best you got because they, again, are in a position of weakness. I'm going to offer them both Alex Lyon and Colton Ellis. And I'm going to try to sell or hope that the Jets are just into the idea of, you guys just do what we are doing right now. We'll flip. We'll take Hellebuyck, and you take the goalie trio that involves not Devin Levi. It's going to involve Alex Lyon, who is a good veteran goalie on a short-term deal. Colton Ellis, a promising-ish goalie that was a rookie last year and doesn't carry a ton of value right now, but is somebody to be hopeful about going forward. And you already have Stuart Skinner because you signed him. And honestly, if you look at their seasons compared to each other, the difference between Stuart Skinner and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in their careers is negligible. And they are the same age. So you kind of already have a Luukkonen. And I know you might want two, but he doesn't want to go there. So you've got your Luukkonen, Stuart Skinner, by the way, and like Luukkonen, like I'm just looking at the baseline stats when saying that they're comparable because, again, we're talking 27-year-old goaltenders. One is a .902 save percentage for his career. The other is a .900 save percentage for a career. And spoiler alert, Skinner's is actually the one who's better. So you got your Luukkonen and Stuart Skinner, Alex Lyon, and Colton Ellis. That can work. We just did it. Made the playoffs. So I'll give you both, Lyon and Ellis. Giving McLeod, Murka, Lyon, and Ellis, and a first. That's 5 pieces. I mean, 2 of the goalies are really kind of add up to 1, it feels like. But that's the offer I would go at the Jets with. And I hope it would work. Maybe you don't even need that much because, again, I don't love their market. Let me know what your package would be. Put yourself in Yarmo's shoes. You're calling Kevin Cheveldayoff. What's your offer for Connor Hellebuyck, who is asked out publicly? We all know it for sure now. He does not want to be in Winnipeg any longer. He's made that clear. We'll talk more about this as the days and weeks go on and we get more updates and more reports. I'm hoping now that he's asked for a trade, we'll get more on if the Sabres check back in, or really even more than that, I'm really curious to see who else is going to be in it. And maybe we'll start learning about that too. All right, we'll also start going through the Atlantic Division. I want to go team by team and start to compare and contrast their offseason with Buffalo's and see if the Sabres stay on top of the Atlantic Division. We'll talk tomorrow here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now your number one sports podcast network. Be sure to go make your next listen Locked On NHL. They got you covered all offseason. 24/7 YouTube channel is Locked On Sports Today. You have that too. But, of course, Locked On NHL if you're looking for more hockey and make that your second listen. We'll talk tomorrow. Stay sharp, Sabres fans. Talk on Friday.